What's the dumbest mistake you've seen an incompetent co-worker make? Story 1. The designer, creative director, and head of production all missed that there was an 8-day week on a calendar. We sent 10,000 copies of a useless calendar to a client. Rightly so, they refused to pay for it. Story 2. I had a co-worker who was a guidance counselor at 5 schools in district. She was supposed to work one day at each school unless she was called to a school for an urgent case. She would frequently call the school she was supposed to be at, stating she had an urgent case at another school. One day at lunch she was talking about what was happening in her favorite soap opera. This was before VCRs, and the show aired long before the school day ended. The principal was sitting at our lunch table. He got up, smiled, and told her, "See me when you are done with your lunch." After checking, she hadn't seen more than a few kids per week for many months. Funny thing is, complaints about her work had gone down in that time. She was a crappy guidance counselor. Story 3. At a Petco, all the guinea pigs were in a big plexiglass enclosure with a center divider. Boys on one side and girls on the other. An employee decided that all the long-haired guinea pigs should be on one side and short-haired on the other. It took forever to sort them out, and all the females were pregnant. Story 4. I grabbed the arm of an intern once, right as he was about to grab a gauge, the big wires that feed electricity the whole building, barehanded to move it out of the way to show us a problem behind. It was hot. He claimed it was fine, because he was only gonna touch one wire at a time. The lead electrician respectfully requested said intern be removed from his site before turning himself into carbon and paperwork. I agreed with this sentiment and had intern watching OSHA videos for almost 3 days straight as punishment. Story 5. Shut down a critical file server, then lied about it even after he was presented with the logs that showed it was his user account that initiated the shutdown. It's not so much the mistake that he made, but it was when he lied about making the mistake. That was a rookie move. Story 6. I worked on a golf course during the summer area with lots of poison ivy. 2 of my co-workers were instructed to weed a river edge area. If we encounter poison ivy, we either stop what we are doing or go get full suit protection with respirators. These were weed whacking in the thickest poison ivy I had ever seen. No protective suit or glasses or respirator. I roll up and notice what they are doing and point out all the poison ivy everywhere, aerosolizing the oil. They both ended up in the hospital on steroid to prevent their death because of the oils they inhaled. Story 7. Not a mistake necessarily, but I once witnessed our chief accounting officer and our only accountant, it was a small company, type in values into 2 Excel cells, pull out a calculator, add the 2 numbers together in the calculator, and then type the answer in a 3rd cell. She had apparently been doing this for years, with sheets consisting of thousands of rows. I explained how to use formulas and copy them, but she apparently forgot because I saw her doing the same thing again months later. Story 8. Worked in a machine shop. One of the lathe operators left the bar of cold rolled steel he was turning hanging out the back. When he turned the machine on, it literally deformed and turned into a freaking helicopter blade that ripped the back of the machine apart and eventually flew off at high speed. Luckily no one got hit by it. If so, they'd be dead. Story 9. When I was in the Coast Guard, there was an incident when a vessel called in what they thought was another vessel in distress, but couldn't be sure and couldn't raise them on VHF. The watch commander kept refusing to launch the rescue boat until he had more details. Like dude, this far north, the life expectancy of a person in the water without a survival suit is measured in single digits of minutes. We can get more details when the boat is en route. The exact position of a bunch of floating corpses is of limited value. After 3 or 4 minutes I just said it and launched the boat. It turned out the suspected casualties' radio was banjaxed, but they were otherwise fine. Their boat just had a very low freeboard and looked a bit sinky. I fully expected to be canned for it, but I was not. The old man had a long conversation with the guy about how nobody will ever find fault with sending an asset to a possible false alarm, but failing to send an asset to a real emergency is not good. The dude before I joined had shrugged off a red flare report as a hoax. 2 people died in that one. Story 10. The office we worked in was shut down due to COVID and the company went 100% remote. A new senior engineer was hired to work directly with our product team and also manage a team of developers. During our company-wide weekly Zoom meeting, after he was done presenting for the company, he turned his camera off but forgot to put himself on mute. 100+ people heard this man playing Fortnite and talking down about the company to someone else in the background among other things. He only lasted a month. Story 11. I worked in a veterinary hospital for a good number of years. One day, unknown to me, some little girl had found a dead, dying seagull with her family and brought it in to see if we could help it, but it has passed by the time they arrived. Our veterinary technician took said bird for disposal but was too busy to deal with it then. So instead he just packed a box with the dead bird into our storage area with dozens of similar boxes and just leaves it there. Days go by while he is still working. I come back on shift and something is seriously rank in the office. Customers are complaining. No one knows what would cause it, but I eventually find the box buried beneath other supplies. I walk up to my head receptionist and say, "So, seagull," and watch the absolute fury grow in her eyes. The tech did not last long after that. Story 12. I used to work for a landscaping company, and over the course of a summer, I witnessed one of my coworkers accidentally set 3 different things on fire: a hedge trimmer, a truck, and himself. Story 13. Poured sink cleaning solution into the ice cream machine instead of the cream mixture, and I had to stop them. They then said, "I'm sure it'll be fine, it was only a little." No. That would poison people. I had to clean out the whole machine top to bottom and refill it. I ended up throwing away nearly a whole bucket full of contaminated ice cream mixture. I would also like to add that the containers didn't look anything alike. The sink stuff came in big plastic jugs with screw tops, and the ice cream comes in cardboard cartons, like orange juice, that you have to cut open. So I don't know how she could have possibly mixed the two up. Story 14. One volunteer had no computer experience. We showed her step by step how to do her job. She didn't know what a mouse was, how to click on something, etc. We got her up and running. She was pleased with herself at having gotten the hang of using a PC. Fast forward 2 hours. I come back to the office and she's in tears saying, "I swear I didn't do anything. There were just fish everywhere all of a sudden." I look at the computer and found the aquarium screensaver. After her little breakdown, she had to take the rest of the afternoon off. Story 15. Nearly leaving a child behind on a field trip. We took a large group of 4- and 5-year-old children to visit a farm, petting zoo, pumpkin patch. We had 3 vehicles. I was in charge of my own group, but I noticed one of the other teachers was being very lax in her supervision for most of the trip. When it was time to leave, I loaded my children on the bus with some other adults and did a headcount attendance check. Before getting on my bus, I noticed that the other teacher had climbed onto her bus and sat down before the children boarded. She walked on first and had the kids follow her. I almost let it go, but gut instinct told me she wasn't counting her students. Once they were all boarded, I walked back and climbed on her bus. She seemed irritated when she realized I was checking on her. I was not a supervisor or anything, just a fellow teacher, so she didn't answer to me in any way. She said something like, "We're all good, let's go." I knew how many were in each group, so without answering her, I did a quick count. Sure enough, we were missing one. I ended up leaving the bus and going to find the kid myself. He was still on the playground with children from another school. When we got back to the bus, the other teacher blamed the kid. She said he wandered off. Really? She is the one who gathered the group and left the play area, meaning she is the one who wandered off. She was pissed when I went to the administration about the incident. Story 16. When I was in the Navy, this nice and pathological liar was on an armed watch with AM-14 rifle patrolling the topside decks. Literally, all you have to do is walk around for 4 hours with a rifle on your shoulder. This dude came back to the quarterdeck, main entrance to the ship, with no gun. He tried to claim it fell off his shoulder and into the water while tying his shoe. How a rifle would fall off your shoulder, pass through your hands that were tying the shoe, and through all 3 lifelines, like guard rails, is still a mystery. My theory is that he was doing drill team stuff, like tossing it spinning in the air, and lost it that way. Story 17. I worked in a paint shop, and every time a new chemical was introduced to the shop, I would ask about the hazards. They would tell me that it is a green chemical, there are no hazards. It's baby safe, they would say. Once when I entered the shop, I saw a guy using a new spray. The side of the bucket indicated that it was dangerously poisonous and highly corrosive. I told him that he should be using a mask and gloves to use that chemical. He said, "Don't worry, it's baby safe." They even have a picture of a baby playing in it. Sure enough, it did. After seeing the image, I yelled at the guy, "This is the baby. He is not playing, he is not swimming, he's dying." Story 18. Social worker here. We're supposed to see clients who live with families once a year. A mom of a kid kept calling her worker but got no answer. Mom called the on-call worker, who discovered the assigned worker had logged the visits in and made thorough notes. The mom said she never saw her in 2 years. This led to her whole caseload being audited, and then they found she had logged a visit with a client who'd been dead for months. While being audited, her supervisor decided to do a surprise visit to the client she was supposed to see. She never showed up and logged in the visit the next day. Story 19. My co-worker at the bowling alley had to walk down a lane where a group of very young children, maybe 4 to 8 years old, were bowling to retrieve a ball that had stopped in the gutter about halfway down to the pins. When he had picked up the ball, my other co-worker told him to go walk it back down to the children. However, this guy had it in his mind that it would be best to bowl it back down at the group of small children instead. Luckily, one of the adults with the children was a big muscular guy who was able to stop the ball and pick it up without anybody getting hurt. Story 20. I used to work as a pharmacy tech. Most antibiotics for kids come as powder in a bottle. We add distilled water to make it liquid upon receiving prescriptions, as the solution only remains stable for 10 to 14 days, depending. One day, a father drops an amoxicillin prescription for a child. Usual questions are asked like age, weight, allergies, type of infection, and desired flavor. Product is prepared and given to the father. He leaves. 2 hours later, he comes back. Says the medication smells funny. I think medication often do. But I still waft the scent with my hand to my nose and is right. Something is off. I give the bottle to the pharmacist. He agrees and makes another bottle right away. The original antibiotic bottle smelled like straight up alcohol. In a lab, we keep multiple solvents for many use. Water, simple syrup, mineral oil, and ethanol. One of the techs added ethanol to the antibiotic instead of water. And we were all flabbergasted as how the mistake could have occurred, because all the solvents are 1, of different size, 2, of different label color, and 3, identified in huge letters. We identified the tech guilty of that mistake, and they couldn't even say how that error occurred. If you've gotten this far and enjoying the content, please leave a comment of your own story. We'd love to make a video of them in the future. Story 21. I worked for a non-profit that hired a guy in fundraising purely for his Rolodex, and they couldn't care less about any of his job functions as long as he kept bringing more rich people to fundraiser parties. Well, when the pandemic hit and we were forced to go remote, it became clear how incompetent he was with technology, and how he'd been coasting for years in the office by sticking to phone calls instead of email, etc. We had our first major online fundraiser coming up, and I warned my boss that this dude had no idea how Zoom worked, never muted himself, camera up the nose, treated it like watching a YouTube video. But again, he was the guy inviting all the rich people to the event, so they didn't want to lecture him about a computer program and hurt his ego. Then in our massive 200+ person Zoom event, he set his laptop on the bathroom counter and proceeded to take a shirtless, nasty old man dump complete with grunting, splashing, and squelching. It was so loud it drowned out the speaker. They had to end the event early because they had no way to mute him, and it kept going for a full 2 minutes with no sign of stopping. I nearly threw my laptop out a window that night. Story 22. Annual sales meeting. Brand new guy is seated next to the CEO. He proceeds to put his head down and fall asleep on the table. During the meeting, they woke him up at lunch to fire him. Story 23. Was making pizza. Guy broke the pizza board, the thing with the handle you make the pizza on, and then slide the pizza into the oven. I found the other one and he lost that. So I told him to make pizzas on one of the plastic cutting boards. He put the pizza into the oven on the board and just left it. The board melted. No more pizza that day. Story 24. This was in school, but it's so incompetent I want to put it here. It's a fairly recognizable story from my school. I hope someone finds it. This kid tried to use the teacher's computer to find the answers to our next test. He did it while she was teaching science class, so there was a separate room attached where she stored materials and her laptop. So he's in the room and she's lecturing to the class. Turns out the computer was connected to the projector display. We're all watching on the projector, along with the teacher, what this genius is doing. Man was in her directory folder typing in test. Story 25. I worked as a radiation protection tech at a power plant that was refueling. My job was to sit outside of a contaminated area, and if anyone wanted to take something out of the area, tools, etc., I had to make sure it didn't have any radioactive particles on it. To do this, you wipe the tool with something like a tissue and then hold the tissue up to a machine called a frisker. If the needle on the frisker goes above a threshold, then the tool has to be cleaned or left in the area. One day I come back to relieve a guy who had been sitting outside the area for 2 hours. He tells me there's been no issues and everything has cleared. I look at the frisker, leaned over, and turned the machine on. Story 26. I worked at a tech repair shop, or not sure how to call it, but we basically repaired laptops, PCs, printers, and the like. This was ran by 3 older dudes and one of their nephews worked there too. The dudes were pretty chill most of the time, and one of them was really cool like, all the time. The nephew was a moron though. He had seniority over me, but they trusted me way more than they did him. Despite being there for more than a few years, and despite him being a close relative. So one day, the chill dude has to take a printer to a company that was like 2 hours of driving away, and since it was the nephew's task to test the printer properly, he asked him like 10 times if he had tested it. The nephew said he did, just 5 minutes ago, and that it worked. Of course, he did not test it and it did not work when he hooked it up at the company. Needless to say, the chill dude went ballistic on him. Shortly after that, he got fired because of many similar mistakes he made. All he had to do was test the f***ing printer. It was 5 minutes of work. Story 27. Had a coworker land a plane on the edge of the runway. Like the starting edge. Cracked a landing gear leg and bent a turbine blade in one engine. Then the scatterbrained old moron doesn't log it or tell anyone. Just parks it and walks away. The next crew doesn't notice the damage because it's really not easily detectable. So, they go flying and get a bunch of weird shit going on with the port engine. When they turn back, the f***ing gear wouldn't lock down. Fortunately, they were able to get on the ground and stopped without making themselves or anyone on board dead. All we did was fire him. No reports to our regulator, no criminal complaint about his conduct. In hindsight, I should have made those complaints myself rather than leaving it to our management. Story 28. Had this new delivery kid at a pizza shop. He would take a fair bit longer than normal to deliver, saying it's easy to get to the street or road, but difficult to find the exact house. Turns out he had no concept of odd and even house numbers being on opposite sides of the street, and was zigzagging across the road. It's one thing to not know that before starting, it's another to do the job for a couple of hours and not immediately recognize it. Story 29. Putting all the patient's false teeth in a bowl together to soak on a dementia ward. Took us weeks to try and match patient to teeth. No, they weren't marked up with the patient's names. I doubt the right teeth ended up with the right patient. It was all guesswork. Story 30. My wife worked at a gas station and found out her coworker, who'd been there for years, had been refilling the napkin dispenser by cramming them one at a time through the front slot. She walked up and unfastened the back, and apparently his jaw hit the floor. He had never considered that there might be a better way to do this. Story 31. Working in a pharmacy, a pharmacist gave a customer a flu shot and threw the used syringe in the container with the new syringes instead of the container to dispose of them. Another pharmacist went to grab a new syringe later on and ended up getting stabbed with the used syringe. Caused a total storm. Story 32. A guy was using the overhead crane in a machine shop I worked in. It had 2 hooks on it, one was raised right to the roof, the other was lowered and beside another guy's machine. The guy using the crane was looking at the hook by the roof and mobilized the crane. He was wearing earmuffs and the shop is loud AF. So when he started, he almost killed everyone in the line of machines with the other hook. He couldn't hear the rest of us screaming. The hook almost threw the first guy into his lathe, hit the next guy's toolboard, flipped over to the side he was on, almost put him into his lathe, rinse and repeat for the next 3 machines. When it bounced over the last one, it grabbed the A-frame that held all the bar stock and started lifting 30 to 40 t of steel off the ground. Someone finally made it to him and slapped the controls out of his hands. That was his last day at that job. Story 33. New temp to hire administration. She was supposed to order lunch for a big meeting. They told her where to order from and how many omnivores, vegetarians, and vegans. She showed me the order she was going to place and I corrected her, pointing out she didn't have any vegan food or enough vegetarian. She told me I was wrong and ordered anyway, even with me screeching at her not to do it and explaining what was wrong. Omnivores got beef. Vegetarians got chicken, it's not meat. Vegans got salads with egg and cheese, but it has vegetables. She was not hired on full-time. Story 34. Patient with late-stage Alzheimer's had been progressively getting sicker. Used to be a walker or wanderer, eventually just got a bit sicker each day and bedbound. Everyone kept giving his meds like normal. Ate less, tummy became distended. He was found unresponsive in his bed, apparently vomited, and died. The nurse's aides were in charge of cleaning him up. One went to clean the strange vomit that came out of his nose. She wiped it with her gloved hands. It was feces. He had feces coming out of his nose. He apparently had a bowel obstruction, and it got so bad to the point that everything backed up and he was vomiting up his own undigested food and fecal matter. A simple monitoring of his distended stomach would have revealed that. A simple charting of his last bowel movement would have revealed that. Nobody could find when his last bowel movement was, and the charting that should have been done apparently hadn't been done in months. It could have been caught. He didn't have to die that way. All those little negligent mistakes eventually lead up to one gigantic mistake. Story 35. Took the wrong coffin to a funeral. Someone else had to drive to the cemetery with the correct deceased on board, and thankfully they made it before the viewing. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Thread Talk for more content like this. Also, don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out. Have a dope day and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers!